Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be with you tonight. We are bringing you another exciting professional development session. And this professional development session is all about learning to cultivate productive citizens. So much of what our job is as teachers is to teach our students how to become productive citizens in their future. So we're excited to bring this workshop to you guys today. There's also a corresponding guide or a worksheet that could go along with this worksheet to go along with this workshop. So I'm going to drop that into the chat so that everyone will have access to that. If you'll give me just 1 minute to put that into the chat, that way you guys can follow along as we go throughout the professional development this evening. Okay, so that should be in the chat. If anyone has trouble accessing it, they can email me and get access to that guide, that workshop guide, as we go throughout the workshop tonight. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about first, what does it mean to be a productive citizen? So in thinking about becoming a productive citizen, we have to think about how can we help our students to become those productive citizens once they graduate and have futures of their own. How can we help them to become that productive citizen of society that we hope that they will be? But first we have to understand, what does that exactly mean? Well, a productive citizen is someone who shares with others, but not just shares anything. A productive citizen is someone who shares their skills, talents, and abilities with others. Okay. So what does that look like? Using your own skills and talents to help other people, to contribute to society. That is what we're trying to achieve with our students. But before they can actually do that, they have to go through a few steps, right? So we're going to talk about 3 things tonight that's going to help us as teachers really cultivate our students to become productive citizens of society. Those 3 things that we're going to talk about is number 1, discovery. Number 2, application. And number 3, contribution. Okay, so those 3 things we are going to talk about as we go throughout this workshop tonight. So first, let's start with discovery. How do students discover their skills and talents and abilities? Well, think about how you have discovered your own skills and talents and abilities. That might be through asking yourself questions. That might be through asking other people questions. And maybe it's through trying different experiences, being in different situations and seeing how you react and how you're able to handle certain situations. So those are the ways that most people discover their own skills and talents and abilities. And those are the same ways that your students can discover their skills, talents, and abilities. So we're going to talk about those things and how you can help them to do some self-discovery. All right, so first thing is self-assessment. We want to help students assess their own skills and talents. And some different ways to do that is through maybe personality test, maybe through aptitude test, or maybe strengths test. There's all kinds of resources out there that are available for students to use online and for you guys to use in your own classrooms. Many of them are free. The biggest personality test, the most popular personality test that you probably think of is the Myers-Briggs personality test. And there's lots of different versions of that available online. Many of them are free to utilize. But that's definitely something that helped me, even as an adult. I never did this as a student in high school, but as an adult, understanding my own personality traits was extremely helpful in allowing me to figure out who I was and how to communicate and interact with other people, whether it be on a team or in a employer setting. learning about your own personality is extremely important. And I wish so much that it was something that I would have done at a younger age. So I would definitely recommend providing those resources for students to utilize, whether it be the Myers-Briggs personality test or some other personality test, for them to really get to know who they are. Aptitude. Aptitude is not personality. In fact, aptitude is something that is developed at such a young age. Usually, they say around third and fourth grade. Students, young people have already developed certain aptitudes about them. My absolute favorite aptitude test is called U Science, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But aptitudes are things that you're just naturally good at, the way you think, the way you make judgments, and things like that. And then lastly, strengths tests. So figuring out your strengths and your weaknesses. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And so when you can help students assess their own strengths and weaknesses, that's going to give them an advantage early on in their life. And learning what your strengths are and how to use them is extremely important, but also learning what your weaknesses are and how you can develop skills and talents to improve your weaknesses. So any type of self-assessment test that you can provide for students is going to be helpful for them in discovering their own skills, talents, and abilities. So let's talk about a few of those tests that are available. I've already mentioned U Science. If you've never checked out U Science, I would definitely recommend giving it a look. It's a great way for your students to assess their aptitudes. And the best thing about U Science is not only does it assess their aptitudes, but also their interests. And it links different careers to their results. So they will be able to see what careers might be a good fit for them in the future. And it's not based solely on interest. Like I mentioned, it's got that aptitude element of it. I absolutely love the Myers-Briggs. You see, there's all these different personality types. There's 16, I believe, 16 different personality types. And so understanding not only your own personality type, but also reading and researching about other personality types will help you and your students to be able to communicate and interact with people in society much better. So that's another test that I really, really love and would highly recommend. And then lastly, the Clifton Strengths. This test is not free, unfortunately, but there's probably some free versions of it out there. I think it's usually about $12 a student. There is an education discount, so it might be something to think about using in your classroom, but it could help students to identify what their natural strengths and abilities are. So self-assessment is absolutely key for students to discover their own skills, their own abilities, and their own talents. But another thing that you can do is just simply discuss this. So I remember being in high school and thinking that, I wasn't an athlete. I couldn't play the piano. I wasn't a musician. I just remember thinking there was just nothing that I was naturally good at. But in my mind, I was thinking that talent was directly related to athletics or performing arts or you know, um, academic ability. All of those things I just had in my mind, like, I'm never going to be an actor. I'm never going to be a musician. I'm just not good at those. And I think sometimes many of our students feel that same way, especially in this world of social media where they look at all these Instagram influencers and models and people that they consider to be extremely talented or extremely popular. So they have all of these people that they're looking at and comparing themselves to. And I think it's easy for our students to feel less than. So having those discussions about the different types of talents and abilities that are out there, it may have nothing to do with music or nothing to do with athletics, but reassuring students that everyone has their own natural skills and talents and helping them identify what those are is extremely important to the discussion. So talking about things like soft skills, some people are naturally good at communicating. Some people are naturally good at listening. those soft skills of problem solving and working together as a team, being able to communicate well, all of those things are talents and skills that students possess. They may not realize that they possess them, but those, just like being able to run extremely fast, or, the 40-yard dash, although that is a talent, being able to communicate is also a talent too. So having the discussion with your students about the different types of skills and talents that they could potentially possess is very important. And I know sometimes that's something that is easy to say, like, oh, you should just discuss it. But sometimes that little step of reassuring students that even though maybe they're not the best athlete, or they're not the best, piano player, or whatever it might be, that they still have talents within them that could help them achieve really awesome, incredible things. Even empathy. A lot of people lack empathy, but people that have the ability to understand other people's emotions and really feel what they're feeling, that is, to me, that is a superpower because it's not something that I naturally have. I personally have a hard time naturally connecting through emotions with other people. And so to me, that's a superpower. But there's tons of people out there that possess that naturally. So understanding that you have your own unique skills and talents, and helping your students have their own unique skills and talents, is key to that conversation. Even things like being organized. I'm sure you can think of students that are super organized, they're detail oriented, maybe their locker is in immaculate condition of books and notebooks all placed, and maybe they're color coded. That is an extremely awesome talent. And so pointing those things out to your students, making comments about, you know what, you are very organized, that is a great skill to have. Making that simple comment, pointing it out to your students, is key. So having that discussion with them about what skills and talents and abilities, even if they might seem simple, letting students know that they are extremely powerful to their future. Okay, so what are some other ways that maybe students can discover their skills, talents, and abilities? Another thing is to ask other people. We talked about self assessment. So, taking those different quizzes or personality tests or strengths tests, that's a great way to self assess. But also asking other people. A lot of times, people around us can see more clearly than we can see our own selves. And so, encouraging your students to ask their family, ask their friends, maybe even ask teachers, what are they good at? One of the most unique, I wouldn't say projects, I guess activities that I've used in my classroom before is I will have students fill out a skills inventory about themselves. It might have 300 skills listed on there, everything from organization to, running fast to being able to communicate, or, whatever it is. It might have 300 skills listed, and students take inventory of the skills that they think that they have. But then I also have those same students give those skills inventory sheets to their parents, and have their parents fill out the skills that they think their student or that they think their child has. Same thing with their friends. Have their friends fill out a skills inventory about themselves. Have their teachers fill out a skills inventory. That way they're getting input from outside resources of people who can see them on a daily basis, people who know them. That can see maybe something that they can't see themselves. And it's always good to hear that positive reinforcement from other people about what you're good at. They might know that they're a super organized student, but hearing it from someone else goes a long, long way. So that simple task of just asking other people what they're good at, having your students ask other people what they're good at, is going to go a long way in discovering their own skills, talents, and abilities. And then lastly, try new things. So when I was a teacher in the classroom, one thing that I always tried to do in my classroom is have opportunities have equipment, have resources available to students that they wouldn't normally have access to. So I taught in a very rural area. It was a very rural school. We were low income. And so a lot of my students didn't have access to things like iPads or laptops. And so, those are easy things to provide in your classroom, but also thinking outside the box. Like, what are some other things that your students might never have access to? So I purchased a drone for my classroom so that students could play around with it and learn how to fly a drone. 3D printing. We had GoPros in my classrooms where students could use the different equipment to film short videos or commercials or create cool, promo videos for our athletic teams. So GoPros, we had podcasting equipment in my classroom, and students would create different podcasts about what they were learning. So they were learning to use all of this equipment and having access to this equipment that otherwise they would have never had access to. So every year when our funding came around, I would always try to think outside the box about what type of equipment, what type of experiences would my students normally not have access to, and what can I do to provide them access to it? Encouraging them to try new things will help them open up and unlock and discover skills and talents that they probably didn't even know that they had within them. When you think about, of course, during the pandemic, you can't really go on field trips. But when you think about planning field trips, think about what opportunities, maybe what behind the scenes could you expose students to really get them to try something new. And who knows, they might discover a skill or talent that they never knew that they had. So definitely try new things. So we've talked a lot about discovery. Discovery is very, very important. And students, especially high school students, middle school and high school students, are really in this time where they're learning a lot about themselves. And when they can learn about their skills and talents and abilities and really get a good grasp on what they're good at, and even what they enjoy, what they're passionate about, that's a great time for us as teachers to be able to allow them to have those opportunities. Okay, so let's say that students have discovered. You as a teacher has helped them discover what they're good at. Now what? Okay, so now we're going to talk about application. How do you apply those skills and talents and abilities that they have to the real world, right? So application, it involves two different things: projects and community. So let's talk a little bit about projects first. Think about the projects that you have in your own classroom. You might have students build something or create something or solve a problem. Whatever projects that you typically do within your classroom, I want you to think about how you can restructure them to provide different roles and responsibilities for your students to plug into. I know a lot of times when we as teachers have projects in the classroom, maybe we divide them up into groups, or maybe we even allow students to choose their own groups to complete a project. Well, a lot of times what happens is they might choose to be in a group with all of their friends, and maybe one person does all the work and everyone's just there to get a grade. That happens all the time, right? Or maybe we assign them to different groups based on, who we think is going to work good together. But what you really need to think about doing with your groups is maybe instead of having different groups to complete the same project, maybe think about having one big project for your classroom with different departments of students within your class. So each department of students would work on a different aspect of the project. So let me give you an example. Maybe you have a project in your classroom where robotics is all the rage, right? We talk about STEM education, and robotics is such a cool element of education. Maybe they're creating a robot. And so maybe you have one group that is the design group, what it's going to look like, what colors that robot is going to be, what elements of design, how it's going to look. All of that is the really creative aspect. And so you might have students that enjoy digital art or are really good at drawing or love colors and designs. And they might be a great fit for that department, for the creative department, for the design department. And then you might have another department that's all about budgeting and finance. How much is the robot going to cost? What expenses are we going to run into? Where are we going to purchase the materials to build the robot? Those students might be very analytical. They might be the students that are really good at math or great with numbers. Maybe they're the students that want to grow up and work in accounting or finance. They're very analytical and they can look at numbers and see what it's going to take to break even or maybe even make a profit. How they've got to determine how they're going to generate the money, the income, in order to fund the expenses for the robot, right? If you have $100 in materials to build this robot, how are you going to get $100? Where is that money going to come from? And then you might have another group that is very organized. They're all about planning. And so they're going to plan out what materials are needed. They're going to plan out when those materials need to be purchased and how they need to be put together and who's going to be putting them together. Maybe this is your leadership, your management role. Then you might have another group of students that is all about coming up with the solutions, solving the problems. Maybe these are your thinkers, the students that, if we want the robot to walk across the room, how are we going to make it do that? Maybe they're the engineers of the group. And so when you create these projects in your classroom, and I'm sure that you guys have projects that you already implement into your classroom. And what I want you to do is think about that project that you already have and how can you implement these different groups of students, that these roles and these tasks and these responsibilities for each group. How are you going to incorporate that in your project where the task and the roles really appeal to the students and allow them to use their creativity, to allow them to use their analytical mindset or their desire to research, whatever their skills and talents are? How can you utilize that best in the projects that you implement in the classroom? And what you'll see happen is students will really plug in, they'll engage, and they'll take ownership when they feel like they're connected to a project, because they're able to use their own talents and their own skills. They're going to really plug in and engage so much more than if they were just given a project and said good luck. So really, I challenge you to think about how can you structure your projects, and maybe how can you even design new projects for your classroom that allow students to apply their skills, talents, and abilities. And so that's the first thing with application. The second thing is community. With application, you need to think about how your community or how your students can really embrace the community through their skills and talents. Okay, so as a teacher, we're constantly thinking, we're constantly creating lesson plans or grading papers. We always have something on our plate. But one thing that I would challenge you to do is look for opportunities within your community. When you're out on a date with your husband, and maybe you see a sign that says help wanted, maybe think about what students that you have in your classes that would be a good fit for that job, or that would really thrive in that opportunity, or would get something out of that opportunity. I challenge you to think about the different festivals that you have in your community, or maybe the different nonprofit organizations, and which students in your class would benefit from those volunteer opportunities, or for being involved with that festival that is put on in your community every single year. Can they volunteer? What contacts do you have that you can connect students with? think about the different civic clubs that you have. Maybe you have business organizations, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce or the Young Professionals organization in your community. How can your students plug in, and which students will benefit from those opportunities? Make suggestions to your students of how they can get involved in opportunities outside of your classroom. I know that might sound like a ton of extra work for you as a teacher, but when you also know your students and their skills and abilities, it's not extra work. It's just second nature to think, oh, you know what? Student X would love this opportunity at the local pet food drive, or volunteering on Saturdays at when they feed the homeless at this church. I need to remember to let them know. And so suggesting and recommending opportunities for your students to really use their skills and talents and to plug into the community is a great way for them to apply what they're already good at and start practicing the motions, the efforts of being a productive citizen. So think about your community, think about your projects that you already have, and how those projects, how your community could benefit your students, and allow them to truly utilize what they already have within them, and help them to practice those skills and talents that they're already good at, or maybe those skills and talents that they would like to be good at that they're not quite there yet. Okay, so now we've talked about discovery, we've talked about application. Now let's talk about the last element, which is contribution. So remember, being a productive citizen is sharing your skills, talents, and abilities with others. Contributing to others, contributing to society. That is what is all about being a productive citizen. So there's 3 ways to do this to help your students to contribute. All right. Number 1 is show. Number 2 is expose. And number 3 is encourage. So how do you show? First of all, you have got to self-assess as well. You as a teacher, you as a human being, what are your own skills and talents? So you are more than just a teacher. You are an actual human that has your own skills, your own talents, and your own interests and hobbies. What are those? Who are you as a person? And think about, how do you share those skills and talents with other people? How do you share them with your students? Who you are makes you a unique teacher. And so when you can show your students that you also are a productive citizen, you also are someone who shares your skills and talents and abilities, they're going to learn from you. So the best way to learn is to show them, right? The best way for you to teach them is to show them. So thinking about that, thinking about your own skills and talents, and thinking about how you can share those maybe within your classroom, within your school, and with your students is something to really think about. Okay, so the next thing is expose. How does this play a part into contributing to society? Well, first of all, number 1, students absolutely cannot be what they do not know. So many times we see students follow in the footsteps of their parents. Now, is that bad? No, not necessarily. But a student's skills and talents may be completely different than the skills and talents of their parents. And so helping students to really develop who they are and understand what roles or responsibilities that they would be good at is a great way for us to expose them to different things that they maybe never, ever could have possibly considered before. One of my favorite things that I used to do in my classroom is I would have themed career roundtables. Now, what does that mean? Well, every single year on Veterans Day, I would have a roundtable discussion, and I would bring in a representative from different branches of the military. And so that was my theme, the military career roundtable. So we would have someone from the Navy, from the Army, et cetera, et cetera. And students would sit around these tables with these representatives, and they would have 5 to 10 minutes to talk with them. And then after that, they would move to the next table and talk to the next representative. And we would do that until every single student had the opportunity to talk to every representative that was there. I didn't just do it with the military, I did it with the medical field. So I would bring in different representatives of the medical field, maybe someone that worked as an athletic trainer, maybe someone that worked as a physical therapist, maybe someone that worked as a nursing home assistant, different elements of the medical field. I would bring them in, and same thing, we would have roundtable discussions. What I figured out is that students felt more comfortable in a small setting. There might only be 5 to 6 students at a table with that professional, but they felt more comfortable talking with them in that relaxed, casual setting than if I just brought someone in to speak to my class. So it was a great way for students to be exposed to many different career paths and opportunities. Maybe even some roles or career paths that they never even really knew existed before. Another thing that I always did in my class is anytime that we had, I mean, anytime that we had substitute teacher lesson plans, or maybe we had activities that I needed to fill one day. We had finished a project and I had to fill like that Friday before we started a new project or something. I always made sure that those activities weren't just busy work. I always made sure that they were activities that would connect them to new career paths or new future paths that they could take that they probably didn't even know about before. So every year on Halloween, we would do a Halloween career themed worksheet where they had to find, you know, information about different careers that many people might assumed to be scary, right? So like a funeral director or like an embalmer. So they would have to research these type careers. And I will never forget, I had a student that had graduated, and I saw her one day out in the community, and I asked her what she was doing. And she said, well, I'm going to college, you know, for this career path. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And she said, well, one of the worksheets that we did about researching the careers, and it just happened to be one of the Halloween careers, she said, I'd never heard about that before, and it was really interesting. And so she pursued that career path. So you never know when one moment could absolutely change everything. You as a teacher, you as a facilitator of your classroom, you have the opportunity to be that moment for your students. And so every single student is different. Of course, every single moment that might change their life is going to be different for each one of your students. So you never know when exposing them to these different opportunities will spark something within them that might open up a skill, open up a talent, open up a passion for them that they never knew they had within them. So exposure is key. And then lastly, encourage. So I just want to say most students, most young people do not have a clue about all of the opportunities that are available to them. Most of them only see what is right in front of them. They only see what their parents do, what the parents of their friends do, what their grandparents, they only see what their neighbors are involved in. They only see what is right there in front of them and have absolutely no clue what the world offers, what this big, broad, exciting world offers for them. So I encourage you to be their clue. Be the clue, be the encourager within their life that opens up all of these possibilities for them. Be the encourager that tells them what they're good at, that provides opportunities for them to excel using their own skills and talents, whether it be creative mindset or, an analytical mindset. whatever it might be the encourager to provide those opportunities and show them what absolutely could be. So I know that's a lot of information that we just went over, but think about how you can help students discover, think about how you can help students apply, and think about how you can help students contribute their skills, talents, and abilities, and that will help them become a productive citizen. You will be cultivating so many productive citizens in your classroom if you follow these 3 elements and apply them to your classroom. So that's all that we have for you tonight, but we have new professional development every single month that we go over. And each month is a new topic. So be sure and check back to see what our next topics are going to be. Every single professional development tours workshop includes a free guide that goes along with the workshop, and also a certificate for 1 hour of professional development that you can use at your disposal. So we will be sure and send that out to all of our attendees tonight. We will also make sure that you get the worksheet as well too. This is my contact information, so if you ever have any questions, suggestions, ideas, you need support, whatever it might be, please feel free to reach out to me.